This is All India Radio. In the weekly program Current Affairs, now we bring you a discussion on present state of economy and overview. The participants are Dr. Pulla Rao, economist, Nirupama Soundararajan, financial analyst, and Santosh Tiwari, journalist, who initiates and moderates the discussion.
Indian economy has seen two big moves this year in the last 6 months or so. Demonetization was announced last year in November, and the impact, and also post-demonetization, whatever is happening in terms of bringing in black money, in fact finding out black money and also tackling tax evasion, etc. This process is on. So demonetization has been one big move in the economy, and the second big move has been implementation of GST, Goods and Services Tax, from 1st of July. The results, first month's tax collection in GST has already come, and it is quite impressive. Expectation is that going forward, the tax collection will improve. But there are concerns in the economy also, as due to pre-GST sales, etc., it was expected that the GDP will be impacted, and also a little bit of impact would be there post-demonetization, which we can see in the GDP figures which has come for the first quarter of this financial year. GDP growth is 5.7%. One has to remember here that the base for the first quarter was also high, because in the same quarter in the previous year, the GDP growth was 7.9%. And then you had, as I said, two big factors, pre-GST sales and also demonetization impact, which has impacted GDP not in a big way, but there is an impact. Now, there are pluses in the economy, but obviously the GDP growth is under pressure. Analysts and also the government officials whom you talk, they say that probably the problems have already bottomed out. Now, this is the time now for the economy to pick up from here, and one must look at positives. Dr. Pulla Rao, which are the positives which you see right now? One is GST, because the GST collections are expected to pick up. Which are the other positives which you see, which is going to boost the economy going forward and take the economy to near 7% or over 7% GDP growth for the full year?
You have rightly described. All economies have opportunities and challenges. No economy is static. It can't be on automatic pilot. Opportunities come, challenges come. Total changeover, the reform of the taxation sector to the GST model has naturally created various ripples, and it shows on the economy. Earlier, the same thing with demonetization. But at the same time, the positives which we see straight away are, there's a huge increase in the FDI in the economy. GDP is not the only indicator of the health of the economy. It's one of the parameters by which we judge where the economy is going. You have various other positive factors in the economy. The banking sector's health is improving. There's increased investment in agriculture, which will pay off after another 6 months to 9 months. Therefore, I would say that while there were some big structural decisions, the GST, demonetization, the other positive factors are very identified, and the economy will eventually take advantage of them. Along, if you take the consideration what's the scenario worldwide, India still is doing very well. India is a great land of opportunity, and we find intense interest, huge investments in the manufacturing sector, infrastructure sector in the last 2-3 years. These will pay off slowly. The day you invest thousands of crores in the infrastructure, you don't get returns immediately. It is laying out the possibilities and the positives in an economy. Therefore, I think that in no way is the Indian economy affected by any sudden small setbacks or negatives, because the positives are very much there. And as I just mentioned, you see, these are challenges and opportunities, both. How do you change the economy's direction? Where do you want to take the economy to? We are in the right direction. And I think all these positive factors will eventually bear me out.
Nirupama ji, as far as demonetization is concerned, this has been a big, bold move by the Prime Minister. For any politician, to take this kind of a move, fast also, and if you look at the implications and the implications which were projected, if they would have come true, considering all these factors, it was not an easy decision, but Prime Minister Narendra Modi took up this challenge. Now you can see in the RBI annual report that a section of experts and others are looking at the money, 99% of the demonetized 500 and 1,000 rupees notes coming back to the economy, the banking system. People are looking at this whole thing in a manner as if demonetization has not helped. But the fact is that you have formalization in this economy. At least as Prime Minister said in his Independence Day speech, that 3 lakh rupees worth of black money which would not have come into the system, that has come back due to demonetization. That is one factor. Another factor which you can see is that now Income Tax Department has so much of data. They are sitting on the whole data about people, who have deposited this 500 and 1000 rupees notes. Obviously, people have taken gamble and they have also basically come out and have deposited all their money, even if that was unaccounted. Now, it is up to the Income Tax Department to just quickly find out those people, who have evaded taxes or who had these 500,000 rupees in black money. Now, these are challenges which will show you that how far demonetization would help the economy or has been successful. But on the whole, there is no doubt that this step has helped country to reach to a level of transparency which was required for quite some time. But in terms of overall tax collection and growth in the economy, how do you look at demonetization? How do you see demonetization helping the economy going forward?
Two things happened post demonetization. There were reports saying that the income tax collection for the last assessment year and for this year has increased. So to some extent, as you said, with the kind of data that the department is sitting on, they have the opportunity now to actually increase the tax base. India is has a very poor tax base, so very few people and a very small percentage of the population, somewhere between 2 to 4%, are only supposed to be paying tax. Now, we really need to increase that base because obviously we have fiscal pressures, and if you've been tracking the revenue deficit side, there is a serious problem. So not only is there a fiscal problem, but usually you need to churn more and more revenue. There has been constant problem with the revenue deficit. So the only way to be able to do that would be by actually expanding your tax base. That is something that needs to be seen. So I think that will be a positive outcome of demonetization. The second thing which I think has happened is helping certain informal sector to come into the formal fold. With things such as Paytm and digital, what has happened is you see your small, not the kirana stores, but your panwala ka dukan. So things of that size, your vegetable shop, your hawkers, most of them having come on to your Paytm platform. Now, if we are able to integrate that with your mainstream banking in terms of looking at it, you would have actually brought a lot of these micro units into the formal sector, which I think is also a very good thing. Because not only is it good for the economy per se, notwithstanding that, it's great for the enterprises themselves. Because through Paytm, through this, they're able to build a transaction history based on which credit availability is also then, it becomes easy for them. Currently, they don't have a way of actually asking for credit because they don't have collaterals and they don't have transaction histories because it's all cash. But Paytm, on transactions on that, will provide a certain kind of history based on which they can actually apply for microcredit also. So I think these are two things which will help the economy grow to actually go ahead.
Dr. Pullera, as you mentioned that FDI is one bright area for the economy in last 2 years or so. Then exports are also picking up. These are two areas. And then after a record crop production, food grains production last year, this year also agriculture growth is expected to be better. But obviously in his report, the second part of economic survey, the chief economic advisor has indicated that probably the economy would grow at the lower level of the range which he had suggested earlier, that is 6.75%. He had suggested 6.75% to 7.5%. So he has indicated that probably in the kind of situation you are in today, the growth would be 6.75%. Even that closer to 6.75%. But the fact is that even if you are closer to 6.75% and cross 7%, then that should be considered a good growth considering the fact, the kind of steps you have taken, GST or demonetization or other challenges, Global challenges are still there, although the situation is getting better, but the challenges are still there. One of the bright points in this GDP figure is that your gross value added, GVA, has been 5.6% in the previous quarter, which means the last quarter of previous financial year and this first quarter of this financial year. GVA growth, GVA is at 5.6%. Isn't it a positive indication that probably, from here you are going to get better and better?
I would also like to add something. The first reaction of the finance minister yesterday to this report was that he did not deny it. He says there are some challenges. We are going to address it. We are going to bring out a slew of policies now to stimulate areas which are going slow, strengthen areas what you have just mentioned, so that the overall value in the economy is boosted. To take apart parts, a small sector percentage is less, so this is more is fine as far as analysis is concerned. But the general thrust, what the Chief Statistical Report Officer has said, is the economy has slowed but is still going ahead. It has not been stopped. There is no negative growth as been in some other economies in the world. And what you have just referred to is a silver lining which is always there. The economy, what we in India are finding is that the growth rate is not as high as we would like it. We have set ourselves a target that we should exceed China, we should be the highest in the world, which is all right as far as targets go. But when you're bringing about major structural changes in the economy on a first-time basis, never had a chance to experiment, see how this works out, and we have various other institutions like the RBI which have their own policies which they have shown their independence at times. It is a very good sign that our economy is able to factor in all these changes and yet go forward. Manufacturing has not been affected. International factors which are cause of manufacturing slowing down. It's not India alone which is suffering that kind of setback. We're also part of the globalized system. Even if all your policies are perfect here, what happens in the rest of the world is beyond your control. And may I just add one more point? As far as economics is concerned, one critical factor is the confidence of the people in the economy. And people have a lot of confidence in the economy and in the administration from all surveys. That itself shows that they expect things to get better. So they invest, they spend more, they have a more optimistic outlook. So all these decisions made by crores of Indians together are taking the economy forward. If the people don't have confidence in the economy, that would be the severest setback for any finance minister or the government. Here it's the other way around. People's confidence probably exceeds the government or the policy makers' confidence in themselves. People are very confident in the economy.
I would come back to one point regarding GDP, that today you have this consumption growth. So in the economy you have consumption growth, but the concern area is your investment. Investment is not growing. So if you look at this aspect, this consumption-led growth, looks impressive because you don't have investment. I would ask you, Nirupamaji, that if you don't have investment and even then you are growing at a rate of last fiscal it was 7.1% and government is doing its bit but private sector investment is not there. What is happening in terms of NPA that will obviously add to the optimism in coming months or coming days, coming year or so. What should the government do right now basically to improve the investment scenario in the country? Which are 2-3 steps you think can lead to a better investment scenario apart from what the government is doing in terms of NPAs? Because if whatever RBI is doing, if that starts yielding results in next 6 months or so, obviously that would be a big plus. But from its own side, apart from public investment, which are the areas which the government should target so that private investment also picks up?
We started the discussion by looking at some of the challenges that the current government has. And generating private investment is actually one of the biggest challenges ahead. The other one, at an equally important level, is employment. I think the government has not been able to generate as much employment as they had hoped for, and that is also a big problem. And they're connected because unless private investment takes off, employment will also not happen. It's important to focus, I think, on certain sectors which have excellent multiplier factors. One such example, I think, is your construction industry. So the affordable housing scheme, where if you manage to actually build them and if you encourage the real estate sector or the construction sector, it has an extensive multiplier factor, whether it's in terms of investment or in terms of employment. Because you develop a certain area, you will have services that will come there, the infrastructure to support it. This is one thing that I think we will have to look at and concentrate on. The second, and while the two of you have said that with agriculture picking up, I don't think we've done enough for agriculture. The reason why agricultural productivity this year has been good compared to last year or whichever way is because the weather has been nice. Our agriculture today and farmers are still dependent on the rain gods and for good weather in terms of their output. Now that has to change, obviously. Agro-based industries and economy, and it is still the largest employer. Subsidies will work to some extent. It's a problematic area. Nobody wants to really talk about it. But you need to really focus on the agriculture side. There are very, very tiny, our land holding is an issue. You know, the average amount of land that people hold is really small. So how do you improve agricultural productivity? How do you reduce the dependence on monsoons to get better productivity? I think these are also certain areas that we will have to focus on. Private investment, therefore, in this area may help, but you need to actually help grow it. You need to show the inclination to work with agriculture. We've never really given it its due because we've said 3-4% growth rate and we're all happy, we're all satisfied, we give ourselves a pat on the back. But for a country like India where you have such a large population, we will need to look at it in terms of a contributor to the economy. I think private investment there. Make in India is the last one where I think it was hoped that through the Make in India initiative we will find more people coming in and investments taking off. But I don't think that has happened. The current government has been working towards ease of doing business. A recent study that came out indicated that while states have done their bit and reforms have happened, in terms of actually on the ground realities are very, very different. And I think that's an area that they really have to concentrate on. So the reforms that DIPP puts out on its website or Niti Aayog puts out on their website saying states have done well are all input based. Have you done it? Have you not? Investor perception is obviously very, very different and far from the truth. And any kind of ease of doing business initiative that has to be taken, which is the only way which private investment will also grow, has to be an investment-based model, an investor perception model rather than an input-based. I think they have to concentrate on these 3 or 4 things in order to help private investment grow.
You have to also take into consideration, that agriculture was an area which was neglected for quite some time. So beginning with whatever they are doing, whatever this government is doing, they have brought in FDI in food retail. That is one big booster if it picks up. When Amazon is coming here and then other companies are now getting into all this. Obviously this one aspect to it. Then there are schemes like soil health card which has been started. But it will take time before these things, start giving you results. Then in terms of marketing also, agricultural marketing, they are bringing in electronic platform. So it's not that government is not doing, or in fertilizer subsidy also they are in the process of bringing in pilot for DBT and fertilizer, etc. So things are happening as compared to the earlier years. Things have started happening. What is required today in agriculture to bring in more private investment is coherent initiative where the private sector is interested in coming for investment in a big way, thinking that things will help them to do business, in an easy manner. That is one. And in terms of ease of doing business also, in that same report, it has come out that if you compare states, there are diverse results. Tamil Nadu, you can start business in few days, and in other states you can't do it. So in terms of diversity, also in terms of ease of doing business or attracting private sector, state differ. So that needs to be improved. You need to come out with state-specific strategies which are being supported by the center in terms of bringing in private investment. But Dr. Pulla Rao, in terms of investment, I would like to ask you one thing, that Nirupaji said that investment obviously is related to employment. There you have to also understand that this government has tried to change this perspective in a manner where self-employment focus is more just because you don't have more jobs today in the formal sectors. So it's a good idea that you are focusing more on self-employment, but investment and jobs, this is one area where the government has to come out with some grand plan where you have a roadmap for next 5 years, 10 years to improve the situation. Dr. Pulla Rao, how do you think that roadmap can come?
Straight away I would take forward what Nirupamaji said. You have got 50 lakh housing units now which are unoccupied, new units all over the city, all over the country. 5 lakhs here, 10 lakhs there. They're huge assets which are not being utilized. Unless they are taken over, you won't get new housing. Now there is a shortage of housing in the country. But our pattern of financing, of buying houses, is still the old model of 5-year loans. Unlike in other countries where there are 30-year mortgages for houses. I would say instead of the long term, medium term, the immediate thing the government can do is how to help banks, real estate companies to offload these houses in a very much needed sector of housing. How to give enough terms, help them, not with 7-year loans. Go into the Western model. 30 years. You mortgage the house, not the person. You will create immense employment. There will be new construction, and the short-term needs will be addressed. In the long term, all these plans will work out, but that's too far away. As the finance minister said, he is looking at various options to address these challenges. One of the first things he should try to address is how to use these NPAs in the real estate sector. Millions of houses which have been built, owners have not been able to take them, construction stopped at the last mile. If you can regenerate some of these assets, like you have done the stressed assets in the power sector, other places, give them a little boost, finish them. Railways, you have laid out track faster. Highways, you used to have 3 kilometers a day, now it's 12, 15, 20. This is one sector I think will create the jobs you want, because the largest number of jobs are in the construction sector, and cement industry will get a boost, heavy machinery. I think government should focus on the real estate, affordable housing that's already built, how to get it offloaded.
The perception which people today have about government is a positive one. It's a big plus for the government for taking any measure. That perception emboldens you to go for the measures like GST implementation or demonetization, or even small areas which were difficult to bring, the legislations which have been passed, even the bankruptcy code. If you come out with an ordinance to tackle NPAs, those things are there which this perception allows this government to go about. So when it comes to taking big measures from here for improving investment, Nirupama ji mentioned agriculture and also youth and housing sector. But as Finance Minister has indicated already, if at all you have to take the economy to the 8% level in next 2-3 years from 7%, which ultimately at the end of the financial year you will have GDP growth, which everybody expects that in next few quarters growth would pick up and we will reach to somewhere around 7%. Some have expected that it could be even 6.5%, but larger expectation is that of around 7%. So if I tell you to list 3 measures in terms of policy, not in terms of sectors are there, in terms of policy, if you have to list 3 big measures in terms of policy for taking the growth from 6.75% or 7% to 8% level, then which would be these 3 policies?
I would straight away go to my favorite theme. Reduce taxes so that consumer spending goes up. That's immediately, it can be done straight away. There's no time lag. Second, see that the apartments which are already there, the housing units, 50 lakhs or 1 crore units around the country, how to get people to occupy it, how to monetize the assets already built. That's also not a difficult decision. Banks can do it. They're real assets. They're not paper assets. And the third thing, of course, self-employment, as you have said, is the entire range where you have to give more training. That was skill development, which I don't think has taken off as much as it should have. So people can create their own jobs, find employment, and it's a cycle of positivity. So in these 3 sectors, real estate, consumer spendings by lowering taxes, and third, encouraging the youth by giving them training so that they get jobs. If these 3 things can be done immediately, and it will, I believe, change the face of the economy.
In terms of reducing taxes also, Dr. Pulla Rao is right that this is one area which is due for correction for quite some time. In corporate taxes, Finance Minister has already announced to bring down the rate from 30% to 25%. That has not happened in the way it has been announced up till now. Probably the reason is that the kind of hit it will have on tax collection, and the economy was not. Finance Minister officials think that you can't take right now. But after demonetization, in terms of personal income taxation, the very fact that your top marginal rate of 30% kicks in at a low income of 10 lakh rupees is one area which has been a deterrent in terms of expanding the tax base. Do you think that this is now the time, after demonetization, if you want to bring in people into the tax net in a manner in which tax collections increase in a big way, don't you think right now, even if you are not bringing in direct taxes code, you must do something so that top marginal rate could be enhanced, if not to rupees 25 lakh, at least, in a phased manner to 20 lakh?
I think that's a good point, and I think this is probably as good as time you're ever going to get in terms of now looking at direct tax code reforms. Demonetization has given them a lot of data that will support the exercise. We've seen that government also would go one step at a time, so the indirect tax reforms by GST in itself was a very big step. and you don't want to be tackling both simultaneously. So I think they will start on direct tax code next. And it's something that it affects everyone quite to a very large extent. So I think that's a good way to begin. They'll have better data in terms of who are not paying tax, who have been paying tax, all of that, and that should work. Apart from that, one of the biggest reforms that we need to concentrate on is how we finance our growth. The dependence has been largely on banks. That's a huge problem for obvious reasons in terms of NPAs, etc. Our dependence has to reduce on the banking sector. We need to look at alternative mechanisms, long-term funding, capital markets, bond market. There are a whole set of issues there. But that reform in terms of changing how we fund our growth has to come in. And it will take us a while, but we have to start. The second is, I think, digital. It's a huge point here. The government has been pushing. But infrastructure for digital has to improve. So I think we need to spend there. That's a great place for private investment as well. You will see that. And the impact will be quite a lot. The last, as Dr. Pullarao has already said, I keep repeating, is the housing sector because of its multiplier factors. I think these are three.
If you have to improve investment, these are two areas where the government has not succeeded in doing things in the manner even the government wanted to do. These are land acquisition reforms and also your labor reforms. Don't you think, Dr. Pullarao, that the government should again go back in Parliament and try to bring in land acquisition changes, one, and two, push through labor law changes at the central level itself rather than just going through the state governments, so that there is a huge, big message from the government that as far as land acquisition and labor law changes are concerned, this government is going big bang and they are trying to do it, which will improve investment in a big way.
I think right now, with hardly 2 years left for elections, land acquisition is a subject no government can touch. You can go ahead with labor reforms because the country is ready for labor reforms.
Do you also feel that lower interest rates are a necessity? RBI should go for more interest rate cuts, if you want to improve growth? Or do you also think that interest rates reduction is not going to help much at this juncture?
Interest rate is something everyone knows helps somewhere, but I don't think it's the only factor that is responsible for growth per se. There are too many other things, and it's a cost that you usually incorporate into anything that you're calculating. The access to funds, the need for funds, I don't think your big banks and big sectors really worry so much over cost of capital. There is a certain financing angle. It's only because the general slowdown in the economy, we haven't been able to maybe recuperate the money. But I think that will change eventually. But on labor laws, I think one of the things, I don't share Dr. Pullarao's optimism of the country being ready for labor reforms, though I do think it's very, very important. I'm hoping that through the disinvestment strategy that the government has adopted, and maybe that's a way of encouraging better labor reforms and a softer way of bringing it.
So rather than being dejected, or rather than looking at this 5.7% GDP data which has come right now, rather than being dejected or rather than thinking that economy is now in a bad shape, obviously whatever the government has done and whatever is the situation today, one can only hope and one can only think from here the GDP growth rate would only pick up, and ultimately the final figures comes for the financial year. You have a better growth rate and you cross 7% growth rate. The platform has been laid. Demonetization impact will improve tax collection, and GST will start yielding you more taxes. That is also almost a certainty. And the changes in terms of policy which the government has brought in, even if it takes time, positive results would come. So with the hope that this financial year also you have a growth rate of over 7% rather than lower than 7% or near to 6.75%. Thank you both for taking part in this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on present state of economy, an overview. The participants were Dr. Pullarao, economist, Nirupama Soundararajan, financial analyst, and Santosh Tiwari, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can also listen to the program on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.